describes that moment when, and I think everybody has these moments where, like, you're taking a walk and suddenly something clicks for you. And you're sort of transported out of the everyday. You're no longer thinking that you got to go pick up the dry cleaning and do all that stuff. You're just
Right.
in a different place.
Welcome to the Beaufort County Arts Council Artcast. I'm your host, Elena Boyer, coming at you from the historic Turnage Theater here in Washington, North Carolina. If you're new here, welcome to Artcast, the podcast brought to you by the Beaufort County Arts Council, where creativity meets community. Join us as we delve into the vibrant world of the arts, exploring everything from visual arts to performing arts and beyond. Today with me, I have writer and published author Mandy Monath of Washington, North Carolina. And here today, she is going to talk a little bit about her published works and about the local writing community here in Washington. Mandy, do you want to start off by telling us about your role here in the writers community in Washington?
Yes, thank you.
Of course.
Thank you for having me. I'm so glad to be here.
Of
and
course.
I think the Beaufort County Arts Council is just doing amazing things to support writers. So thank you very much. Yes, so I am involved with Pamlico Writers Group. I do the programming for them. So decide what we do, what we're going to do at each meeting. And the group has been around for a really long time. When I moved to Washington, I joined it. That was before COVID. Sherry Hollister was the head of the group then, and she's still the head now. The group really suffered during COVID, but she kept it alive. After COVID, we decided to, once we started getting back meeting pretty regularly, it used to be twice a month, I suggested that we meet every Tuesday, so that every Tuesday there was something going on in Washington for writers. So we have a combination of open mics, critique sessions, special learning opportunities, and guest speakers. So everyone is welcome. It's not a closed group, and we'd love to have new members.
Yeah, that's awesome. Before you moved to Washington, where are you originally from?
Salisbury, North Carolina.
Okay. Did you partake in any kind of writing groups there as well?
I was, when I graduated high school, I didn't really live there for a long time. But in high school, I did write a lot, and there were little things that you could do with a literary magazine and such in high school. And when I moved to the Triangle area, I always found a writing group to join. And even though I was not working as a professional writer, it was, I think if you want to write, you probably need to write.
Right.
And having a group like that just reminds you that this is an important thing in your life. So even if you don't go on to become a famous professional writer, you can be a dedicated amateur. I mean, amateur means lover, right? So you love this thing that you love, and writing groups can really help you do that, and they can just help you be a happier human because you're doing the thing that you care about. So I've always either started writing groups or joined them wherever I was, and I'm just thrilled to be in this one in Washington.
And that's awesome.
It's
How
really
would you
active.
describe the atmosphere with Pamlico Writers Group?
Really supportive. There are people in there who've, Sherry Hollister, for example, who's, working on her 13th novel, I think. There are other people who were published in that group as well, but there are people who've just always wanted to write and are working on a collection of essays to tell their story.
Yeah.
A memoir is pretty important. There are some poets in the group, but everyone's very supportive of each other. And, we're all just trying to help each other be better writers.
So you accept all levels of writers?
Absolutely.
Entry
all levels.
level?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, entry is where I was for a very long time, and most of the people in the group are. So, I mean, they've
great.
done some writing in the past, but maybe not published anything yet.
Gotcha. And can you tell me a little bit how you fell into writing I know you mentioned in high school you were part of a literary magazine,
Yes.
but was there a time where you were just like, wow, I really want to write. This is what I want to do.
There's never been a time that I didn't want to. I used to make little books out of notebook paper and, tie yarn in the holes.
Yeah.
So I always wanted to do it. I think I always hesitated about it being the main thing I was doing. I think maybe the idea of having to make a living at it was daunting to me. I liked the idea of just having it be this special thing in my life that I wasn't going to have to depend on to pay
Right.
rent. So I just kept pursuing that major. I thought I might major in biology when I got to college because I thought I should do something useful. And I remember going and talking to the academic dean, and she said, well, you can do something useful with an English degree too. So I ended up majoring in English, and I was really interested in classics. So I studied Latin and Greek also so that I could just learn a little bit more about where all these genres came from.
Yeah.
I think I had half-flown ideas about entering the conversation of the ages or something. But I did love Latin poetry and
Yeah.
Greek poetry, and it gave me a real insight into. I realized that I liked to read literature from the point of view of a writer, not so much from the point of view of a scholar. When I went to graduate school, I did get a master's degree. But at that point, I thought, I really don't want to write articles about literature. I want to write things myself and have these things kind of in the background.
Be more of a creative.
Yes.
Yeah.
I was just more naturally inclined that way. I don't think I would have been a particularly good scholar.
Well, and I do think there's something to be said about that. I took Latin as my foreign
for
language.
you.
Yeah, they call it a foreign language still.
Oh,
but,
yeah,
but
absolutely.
I did it in high school, but for me it was to kind of satiate the need to learn more about medical terminology, since that was my
Oh, yes.
original path that I was going
Okay.
to take. And then now I'm a journalism major, so
See?
of course I went off the path that I knew I wanted to write.
And you can blame Latin for that. It took you right into that. Because there's that.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to
No,
interrupt you.
no, yeah. That I agree. And I do think that there is something to be said too that you felt, when you were in college, that there was kind of this stigma around being a writer, not being able to make it off writing, make a living off of writing.
Yeah, you must be crazy.
Right. I still feel that exists today because I feel that when I contemplated being an English major for a second, I was like, oh gosh, like I don't know if I could be an author or even a scholar. Like, I didn't really know if that was going to be it for me, because I'm with you. Not that scholar writing is boring. Of course, it's everyone's niche, right?
Right.
But I think I too relate more to wanting to be creative.
Yes.
And,
And I think
yeah.
it's so important to pay attention to that if that's your bent.
Yeah, definitely. So I would say let's break that stigma, because I feel like that is still an ongoing one, is you can't be as successful or make a living off of writing or being an author. But I think if you put your mind to it and you create the work, I think you can get there.
I think you could get there. I'm not an example of someone who got there because I got another kind of job.
Right.
So that I could do writing on the side.
Right.
But looking back on it now, I think, I probably could have done that
Yeah.
at the time.
Yeah. And I think,
So good for you.
Right.
Keep
yeah.
at it.
We got to be the supporters for people who, are doubting writing as a career.
Right. Well, someone needs to major in English.
Right.
Otherwise, we'll all just be illiterate.
And there's so
the
many
writing will get
pathways that
worse
you
and
can take.
worse.
Right. I mean, you can still become an English teacher or become a professor and do writing on the side.
Yes. Yes,
there are many different pathways these days. So just to veer off a little bit, what kind of style of writing do you do?
Well, primarily I started writing poetry, and I think a lot of people do that. I know a lot of novelists who would say, "Oh yeah, I used to write poetry." So it's kind of that juvenile thing that you do. I think people think of it that way. But for me, it's always been important, and I've continued to write poetry, and have a book of poetry that I put out about a year and a half ago. Not quite that long ago. I've written plays. When I worked my pay the bills job, a friend, Karen Glider, was in the same organization, and she and I wrote a number of plays together. And they were comedies, and it was really fun because we would just go out to dinner and do all the lines. Everything was done out loud, and so which is a great way to write a play,
Yeah.
I think. So that was fun, and I've recently published a children's book called How Counting Came to Be.
In honor of Women's History Month, the Beaufort County Arts Council will be screening The Philadelphia 11, Sunday, February 25th at 3 p.m. This film will be shown with introductory remarks by Anne-Marie Montague. In 1974, a group of women and their supporters organized their ordination as Episcopal priest in an act of civil disobedience and challenged the very essence of patriarchy within Christendom. This documentary film tells their story. Tickets are $5. For more information and tickets, visit artsofthepamlico.org/events. artsofthepamlico.org/events. And how would you say that Pamlico Writers Group has influenced your writing?
I think it's influenced it by encouraging me to get it out of the desk drawer, to actually try to publish something, to put something, because there are examples of people in the group who are saying, yes, you can do this, you can put your things together and you can publish them. And part of that is the advent of print on demand, which has kind of blown the publishing industry wide open.
Right.
And there are some really great things being done that way. There are some things that aren't so great being done that way. But I think this group encouraged me to share my writing with other people more and focus on a project. You know, put your mind to a project. I'm going to publish a collection of poetry. I'm going to publish a children's book and work towards that. Because a lot of the educational sessions that we've had are about, how do you approach an agent? How do you get your manuscript? How do you find a good editor to edit your manuscript? You're on your own if you want to. All that kind of thing. I think that's been a great group for that.
And how has it influenced your sense of bringing community to the writers' table?
Well, the people who come to Pamlico Writers Group, I feel like it's very important to them. And people wander into open mic and think, oh, well, this is cool. I want to sit down and hear what these people have to say. I think people in Washington are becoming aware that there's a pretty strong presence of folks in town who are writing. There's a person, I'll recommend her to you later on, who I think should do one of these podcasts. She's coming out with a dynamite book.
Awesome.
In a few months. So, I mean, and it's funny because once you start doing this, and I'm posting on my Facebook, oh, Pamlico Writers did this last night, it was so much fun. People now come up to me and say, I'm working on a novel,
Right.
And I love that because otherwise, you could sit there all evening with someone and never know that.
Right. It starts a conversation.
It starts the conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's wonderful to have this space. Oh, and Maine Cup has also hosts our open mics. The Maine Cup at Little Inn,
Yep.
I think.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, and so between them and you all here at the Turnage, it's, we've got homes, we've got places to be.
Right.
So it's really nice.
How often does Pamlico Writers Group meet?
It's 4 or 5 times a month, every Tuesday.
Every Tuesday.
So I felt like that was a really good way for us to market ourselves. If it's Tuesday, there's something going on. So look online, look on Facebook, and see what we're doing today. So 2 open, first and third Tuesdays are open mics at the Maine Cup. Second Tuesday is critique group here at the Turnage. Fourth Tuesday is here. Some kind of, lately we've been doing prompt writing, which is very popular with people. You just come, anyone can come. We throw out 3 words, we write for 20 minutes, and then people, if they want, can share what they wrote. Sometimes there's kind of an angle to it. Last time we did character sketch, write about a character. And so there's something every Tuesday. If there's a 5th Tuesday, we've been doing a luncheon
Okay.
with an author who comes, or author and publisher. Last time we had Rose Cushing from Cushing Publishing,
Gotcha.
and she's basically saying, I want to publish your book. Come talk to me.
Yeah,
So that was nice. That was very liberating for all of us.
definitely. What time are they normally
The
when
open
you
mics
meet?
are at 5.
Okay.
The others are the two that are at the Turnage are at 7. The luncheons are at 11, from 11 to 1.
Okay.
So it's 5, 7, or 11. We like having at least one thing in the middle of the day because a lot of people can't come at night.
Right.
So they can come in the middle of the day.
Right. And what genre of writing are you most focused on? I know you mentioned poetry, and I know you have your new children's book.
Yes,
Is that kind of where?
it is. So I love poetry. I love reading other people's poetry. And there are a number of people in our group who write poetry. Children's stories, it's kind of like writing a short story, and I have written short stories. I won the horror contest for the group
Yeah,
down there who does
yeah.
what are they called? Haunted Pamlico.
Yes,
That
yeah.
won a couple years ago, won their contest for this thing that had lots of bugs and frogs and things in it. It was fun to write. So the children's story it's kind of like writing a little novella. This one is about a half an hour read.
Okay.
So it's a little longer than just a picture book for children. I think second and third graders certainly can read this on their own, or you could read it to a smaller child. But it's been interesting to think about putting together a children's book. It was quite a project. I had no idea. So
Yeah, I was gonna ask, I mean, what was the process like in finding an illustrator, graphic designer for this
Yes,
book? Because it is a
yes.
beautiful book. If you all have the time to read it, it is very eye-catching.
Yeah, she did a beautiful job. Molly Leifert is her name. Yeah, so just to back up 1 second, I think for me, people tell you, marketing people, and maybe I'm just not following their advice, say pick a genre and stick with it. But to me, what happens to me is I come up with an idea, and then I think, what would be the best genre for this idea?
Right.
Because sometimes I'll have an idea and I'll think, that's an essay. Sometimes, oh, that's a poem, or that's a play. In this case, that's a children's book. So I'm not following the advice of because I'm not trying to support myself.
Right. Well, also sticking
If
to
I were, but I mean, it just doesn't seem interesting to me. For some people, it would be.
yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's not
But
interesting.
it also
to
puts
me.
you in a box to only adhere to one genre.
right,
Whereas
right.
if you have additional interests, you may not want to stay within that
Right,
realm.
right. So if you look on my, Barnes and Noble page or
Mm-hmm.
Amazon page, here's this poetry book. And then there's a children's book, and I'm sure and the covers don't look anything alike. But I'm thinking, okay, this is a mother-daughter thing. The mother can buy the poetry book, and the child.
Hey, the
can
marketing
get
works that way.
Yeah, you can figure out a way to make it work.
Right.
But to go back to your question about the illustrations, I wrote the story. Then I looked around for an illustrator. I thought I had somebody and waited for several months for him to get started, and then he just decided he was too busy. So my daughter said to me, well, why don't you just ask Sam's sister to do it? Sam is my daughter's boyfriend. And I thought, oh, okay. But I had reservations. She's a college student, and you're
Yeah.
not, you're young too. So I thought, well, can she handle this? Well, I sent her the story. I gave her a very brief description of what kind of I thought the main character might look like in my head, what she was looking like. Kind of red hair, frizzy, a gap in her front. I don't even think, no, not the gap. Some freckles. Well, she sent me back these character sketches, and it was like my character was jumping off the page. It was so exciting. It was so exciting. And she introduced a few things, like she has a little gap between her front teeth, which is I love. But Molly Leifert just did a fabulous job, and she did a lot of the illustrations while she was finishing her fine arts degree at Appalachian State University. And then she kind of finished everything up over the summer after she graduated. But I just could not be happier.
I know. It looks amazing. I mean, it's great. It really brings the story to life too, I think.
And I really didn't know what I wanted, but I knew what I didn't want. I had seen just kind of a popular style of illustration that I just wasn't drawn to it. And so, anyway, she just hit it out of the park.
And your book of poetry, what is it called? What's the title?
It's called This Is Like That,
And
Poems and Process.
and what is the
Why did I name it that?
yeah,
It's
well,
a really
what
good question.
that
No.
and what is it about without giving any spoilers?
Yeah, well, no, it's hard to spoil a book, really. I had a series of conversations with my best friend from growing up. She is a pastel artist. And we were talking about how similar her creative process was, painting landscapes and different kinds of still lifes, and mine, although she's a wonderful portrait artist too, and my process of writing poetry. And we realized that there was a lot of similarity between the two, and the process. So I was thinking, first of all, we thought we'd publish a book together, but the images of her work were just not going to come out looking as good as we both wanted them to. It's a whole different kind of level of a book, an art book. So I decided just to publish the poetry on my own, and I was going to do an introductory essay about this creative process. Then I thought it might be better to break that essay up into small reflections on that process and scatter them throughout the book at the bottom of blank pages that the reader could then use as a journal and write on. Because I wanted to draw the reader in. And could I maybe read a poem?
Yeah.
Okay, we
please
didn't plan
do.
this, but
No, please do.
But the first poem in the book is not the poem that the title comes from.
Okay.
But it describes the process, that describes that moment when, and I think everybody has these moments where, like, you're taking a walk and suddenly something clicks for you. And you're sort of transported out of the everyday. You're no longer thinking that you got to go pick up the dry cleaning and do all that stuff. You're just
Right.
in a different place. And that's what that's the first step in the process that I'm trying to describe. And this poem describes that. It's called Geese. In 8 lanes of rumble and tick, whine and click of engines, halt and go, I don't know how I heard them. They flew so high and few, needing to, surged so on fleshy wings into the darkening sky. Their animal voices found me amid the jumble and snarl, the accidental human ugliness, like a baby's wail reaches its mother. I'd been waiting for a poem, that lull, a gap that comes in secret and separates itself from the rest of the day. I'd been waiting for the thing that stays.
That was great.
So you see, the idea is
Yes.
that, okay, you're just in your life and you're going along and, you're thinking about nothing in particular, just what you have to do next, that like living our lives in a state of quiet desperation. I think Thoreau said
Yeah.
that. And then suddenly you just kind of, something else happens. Something strikes you. I remember walking down the street and this pickup truck came by filled with cedar that they'd cut off a tree. And just that smell just took me somewhere else. And so once that happens, then you write out, I like to sometimes even just make notes on my phone, write it down in a journal, just everything you can remember about that experience.
Yeah.
Now, sometimes that is what ends up being the published poem. And I don't think that's a good idea. I think that's the rough draft. And poetry should not be a paragraph divided into lines.
Right.
It should be different. It should sound different. It should pay attention to the way the language sounds, specifically how the language sounds and images. And so that's what I like to talk to people about, is bring it to the next step so that it becomes this little work of art, this little picture, a little sculpture, And when the reader encounters that, they have an experience that is parallel to what you experienced when you first saw those geese.
Right. And then they can write what they felt.
Well, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. Or that may remind them of something that they experience, and they write their own. But I think the poem has got to bring you to that place. It's got to be powerful enough to bring you to that place. It can't just tell you, this is what I experienced. Do you know?
Yeah.
So it's got to be artful.
Yes. And with both of the books, How Counting Came to Be and This Is Like That, your poem book, what is the rationale or process of self-publishing? Because I know you self-published for both.
Yes, I did. Well, the rationale partly for me was that I was just in a tearing hurry. And people in Pamlico Writers Group were saying, you can do this, it's possible. And it has become so much more possible. In fact, there are a lot of small presses that are really going through the same process that an individual would go through, and they're having their books printed by Ingram or Amazon. What they're bringing to it is contacts,
Right.
a good editor, formatting, that kind of thing, an artist to do the cover. So I had an artist to do the cover for the poetry book, my friend Barbara Garwood, who's I was having the conversations
Right.
with her in the beginning. So I thought, okay, I'm just going to try to do these steps. So I had given my poems to her. She was a really good editor for me, because she got it. She got what I was trying to do. But I had other people read my poems, took their advice, made changes, including people in Pamlico Writers Group. Then I hired a book designer and sent him the manuscript. Readsy is an online service that has a lot of great professionals, and you can see who you like and
Yeah.
how. And this fellow, his name was Steve Kuhn. He was wonderful. He's out in Seattle, I want to think. It's not real clear where people are because we're all just online.
Right.
But he did an excellent job of designing the book so that it looks very professional. And then there's all the getting it up to the Ingram Company, getting it up to Amazon. There's a lot of background stuff that you have to do called metadata. And I stumbled my way through that as best I could. I don't know what advice to give anybody. It's just a grind, and you just want to bang your head against the wall because it's so much work, and it's not what you want to be doing. You want to be writing. So that's the beauty of getting a publisher. And there are a lot of small publishers now who would do this for you.
Right.
They'll do all of that and get it up online for you, help you. You can consign with bookstores. Independent bookstores can order your book from Ingram. So I think that's a beautiful thing, because that is, it's a lot of work. I mean, it's months of work.
I was
to
going
do
to
all
ask,
that.
yeah, I
It's-
mean, for each of these, how long was the whole process of writing and self-publishing? How long do you think it took before it was actually published?
I think from the time that I sent the manuscript to Steve of the poetry book and the time that came out, that was probably 6 months. But I had everything pulled together. It was all edited. I knew the order that I wanted the poems to be in. I knew everything I wanted.
Layout.
Pretty much. I mean, he made suggestions, which were great. So that was probably about 6 months. But that was a big learning curve for me.
Right.
The How Counting Came to Be, I mean, I could have written War and Peace by now at the time that it's taken to do this, but it was just because the misfire on the first illustrator, once Molly Leifert got involved, it sailed along.
Okay.
But I probably still spent 2 or 3 months, 3 months just doing the part of getting it up to the site that was going to print it, putting in all the metadata, getting an ISBN number, getting a Library of Congress number, getting a proof copy from them so that I could look through it and make sure, then ordering those proof copies, and then you decide about all the marketing. Where
It's a
is it going to
strenuous
be
process.
marketed? And then of course you go online and there are all these very cheerful people who call themselves mompreneurs. Saying, okay, now you have to market your book so that you'll sell more than 100 copies. And here's how you do it. And you have a website and this and this and this. So there's all that too.
Yeah.
So I don't understand. I don't think I got the timing exactly right on that. But I did finally end up on my publication date with a website, a Facebook page, an Instagram account, all
Right.
that stuff that you're supposed to do.
Was it all worth it in the end? Now that you
Well,
are officially
the
published.
jury is out on that. The jury is out. The How Counting Came to Be came out February 1st.
Okay.
So we're 5 days into it. Of course, I'm obsessively looking on
Yes.
to see if, or, walking by the bookstore here in Washington, seeing how big has the stack gotten any smaller. So we'll see. My book is called How Counting Came to Be. And I got the idea from reading a book called From Counting to Calculus. That was a reference book I bought when I was homeschooling my daughters for a couple of years. Our daughters. My husband ended up doing a lot of the math for obvious reasons. But this book introduced counting, saying that a number is a symbol that represents a group of things. And that was kind of a revelation to me. I hadn't thought about putting it that way before. And I thought, it might be helpful for children to understand that at the beginning when they're learning about math. So I wrote the story. I ran it by my neighbor, who down up in Raleigh. Before we moved here, she was my neighbor up in Raleigh. She's a math professor at NC State. And so she said, yes, this is exactly right. And this is your main character has discovered something really interesting and important. So that made me feel better about the whole idea. So I'm going to read just the first little bit of it. And when she kind of is getting ready to go off on her adventure.
Here is the excerpt of Mandy's new children's book, How Counting Came to Be.
Once upon a prehistoric time, there was a little girl who lived cavily in a cave with her cave family. Her name was Ugg Poppy, or Poppy for short, which means girl who thinks too much. Her family went barefoot and hunted and gathered. They made useful things from whatever they could find outdoors, and they were very happy. Her father's name was Ugg, which means man who eats every day. And her mother's name was Ugg Rock a Bug, which means lady who speaks big words. Early one morning, Ugg Poppy was playing in front of her family's cave, drawing pictures in the dirt. Her mother was feeding the baby. Everyone else, her father and her brothers, Ugg Wara, Ugg Pip, Ugg Hook, Ugg Boo, Ugg Dogga, and Ugg Peg, had all gone hunting in Great Spear Valley. Suddenly, something went crash. Well, here's a situation, cried her mother. I've broken the very last gourd, and the baby's breakfast is spilled all over. Little Ugg Rook formed his mouth into a perfect O and wailed. Everyone said he was the uggest of the Uggs, because, like his father, he was always hungry. Ugg Poppy picked up some pieces of the broken gourd and fed him whatever dabs of porridge she could save. Her mother breathed a deep sigh. Dear sweet Poppy, began her mother, in my opinion, the decision to go hunting instead of gourd gathering today was unfortunate. Of course, it is hunting season, but for the caveman, isn't it always hunting season? Poppy had long noticed that when her mother was upset, she lectured. Maybe all the Rockas did this. She didn't know because she'd never met her mother's family. They lived too far away on the other side of the faraway river. Gourd gathering, on the other hand, her mother continued, is different. Gourds must be gathered when the wild goose crosses the sky. If you wait too long, the gourds will be nibbled and gnawed by terrapins and beetles. Mom, said Aunt Poppy, Gourds are essential to the prehistoric lifestyle, are they not? Her mother continued. We carry water in gourds. We cook in gourds. We eat from gourds. Excuse me, Mom, said Ugg Poppy. We store our nuts and our berries, our bits of... Mom, Ugg Poppy spoke quickly, what if I go to the gourd patch? I'm big now. I know where it is. Ugg Dogga showed me. Hop through the woods, go across the big wide open place, find the bridge over the not-so-far-away river, and there on the other side of the bridge is the gourd patch. I'm sorry, dear. We can't possibly go today. The baby is much too fussy. I mean alone. I can go by myself. You? Her mother asked. Alone? Please, Mama, let me go, chirped Poppy. I'll be there and back in a jiffy. But what about bogs and quicksand? I promise to be careful, said Poppy. Tigers, stampedes, said her mother. I'm faster than most of my brothers, said Poppy, and much quieter. Ugg Rockabug eyed the last broken gourd. The boys would be back tonight, dragging in all manner of groceries from the hunt, and there wouldn't be a single bowl to eat from. I don't know, dear. I really should go with you. She bounced the baby on her knee. Are you sure you know where it is? Yes, cried Ugg Poppy. Do you promise to be home before dark? Yes, yes, cheered Poppy, and before her mother could change her mind, she charged into the cave for some apples and the sharp cutting stone she used as a knife. She ran out of the cave and across the clearing, and then stopped and ran back to her mother. Well, how many gourds should I get? Asked Ugg Poppy, who liked to get things right. It was an odd question for a girl who didn't know how to count. You see, in caveman days, nobody knew how to read or write or count, and they didn't want to. The Uggs didn't even know how many children they had. They only knew that Ugg could no longer get his arms around them all for his famous Ugg hug. Said Ugg Rockabug, furrowing her brow. Well, how many did we get last year? Prompted Ugg Poppy, hopping from one foot to the other. A gourd for every member of the family, said Ugg Rockabug. Ugg Dogga didn't get a gourd last year. I'm sure he did. He said he didn't. Don't argue with grown-ups, dear, said her mother, patting her on the head and giving her a kiss. Now run along and get a gourd for every member of the family. The biggest gourd you can find, please. As Poppy ran across the clearing, her mother called out behind her, and don't dawdle around thinking, Ugg Poppy, or you'll never get home before dark.
Wow. Thank you so much, Mandy, for joining me today.
You're welcome.
Everyone, be sure to check out How Counting Came to Be, now available at Pamlico Books in Washington, North Carolina, Barnes & Nobles, any independent bookstore, and on Amazon. Have you ever had a favorite song and wondered why it got written? On Saturday, February 24th, the Beaufort County Arts Council will be hosting another round of song stories led by Holden Dixon. So join Holden Dixon, Chuck Phillips, Sometimes Lions, Timothy Bivens, Anna Park, and George Oliver for February's song stories at the historic Turnage Theater. These beloved North Carolina-based songwriters will be playing their original music acoustically and discussing their songwriting process and inspirations with us. So come on out and see these musicians in a way you never have before. Tickets are $20. For more information and tickets, visit artsofthepamlico.org/events. artsofthepamlico.org/events.